Julian Assange.
Actress Jennifer Lawrence was among several stars.
Cyber Week 2016 presents Hackable Humans.
Okay, our last session for today will start now. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to call to the stage Professor Nathan Intrator. Nathan Intrator is a professor of computer science and neuroscience at the Tel Aviv University. He is an international scholar in neural computation, machine learning, and pattern recognition with more than 140 referred scientific publications. Recently, he co-founded Neurosteer, a mobile brain monitoring and health management company with lifestyle and medical application.
This is kind of the last session, but potentially the most important one, isn't it? Because we want to hack the real brain, the real computer, okay? So I'll try to explain why do we need to hack the brain, what does it mean to hack the brain, okay? First, we want to be able to listen to the brain, and this picture is a good example of why we want to do that. Because look at this airplane. This is the F-35, the new plane that we are going to have, about $200 million plane. It has a very wide bandwidth data connection to the ground in real time, so that everything in this airplane is being monitored. Every piece of pressure, of oil pressure, etc., is being monitored. But one thing is not monitored, and this is the brain of the pilot. And you can imagine how important it is to monitor the brain of the pilot. So this is one reason for monitoring the brain. Before we go into the brain, let's go back a little bit of history and see how did we monitor things in the past. Let's go to the first slide. Is there a slide? So this is the first wearable computer about 60 years ago. This is the first pacemaker. As you can see, not exactly portable, but for that person, it definitely extended the life of that person, jumping very quickly 60 years forward, or actually 50 years forward. Then Medtronic introduced this pacemaker. This is an amazing computer, 5-year battery. It measures several things which I'm not going to go into. In addition to the cardiac activity, it measures fluid in the lungs and whatnot, and it can function as a defibrillator. By the way, the first version of this defibrillator did not work so well, so it kind of assumed that the heart stopped beating when it didn't, and gave people some electric shocks, a little bug that could be fixed. So if this is the first small wearable, serious wearable for the heart, this is what happened a couple of years later. That pacemaker became connected to the internet, and then it became a vulnerability. But I'm not going to talk about that. The next speaker is going to talk about this. So let's go to the brain. But before we go to the brain, let's talk about monitoring stress, because obviously stress is the key issue. Well, this is one way to monitor stress. Again, not very successful. This is why lie detectors are still not accepted in court, because trying to interpret the stress coming from the brain through what's called the sympathetic system, which is the system that responds to stress and increases heart rate and makes the vessels more tight, etc., is obviously not working so well. So let's go back to the brain. Let's go back to the brain. This is still 2016. Doesn't look like a good way to monitor the brain. Can you imagine a pilot going with something like this on the plane? Obviously not. This is still being used nowadays. This is actually what we are trying to do. It was mentioned that we founded a company, so we developed a technology in the university that can read the brain only with 2 frontal electrodes. And from reading the brain through these 2 frontal electrodes, we can actually tell a lot about what's going on in the brain. And the 2 slides at the bottom actually indicate new technology, new sensing technology, very flat electronics. One of the companies that develops that is MC10 in Boston, and they will enable a little patch on the forehead to actually do the brain monitoring. Of course, the key is not just the sensor, it's really the algorithms. And this is what we've developed. We've developed algorithms that can take the information from 2 electrodes and actually extract a lot of brain activity information out of there using very advanced signal processing. So this was monitoring. Let's go into hacking the brain itself. I cannot resist demonstrating this picture. This is Professor Itzhak Fried, who is one of the professors at Tel Aviv University and UCLA. And he was performing a brain operation on this woman while she was playing the violin in order to be absolutely sure that he's not removing her ability from playing the violin, but being able to remove something that caused her not to be able to play the violin, which was kind of very close. And for this, he had to keep the patient alive and actually even playing in order to really pinpoint to where we're going to go. And the last slide is a technology that's now becoming more and more available. This is magnetic stimulation. So we are going from invasive, like the previous operation, to non-invasive, like something outside of the brain, which may be either magnetic or DC or AC, namely direct current or alternating current. And all these 3 stimulations are now being studied heavily to actually stimulate the brain. And there's some success. Maybe this is a little too premature to talk about all this already, but there's a lot of studies, and some of it is already being shown. So I envision that in the future, people will have a stick on the forehead and a couple of electrodes somewhere on their head to perform the stimulation that they need. Everything will be connected to the internet with a computer that is going to be small because we don't want to carry a large battery. And that computer can be hackable, okay? So suddenly, a hacker will not just get into our computer or into a database on the cloud and obtain information, but actually will be able to get into our brain and even affect our brain. This is where we are going to. This is the challenge. These are the challenges for this generation of computer scientists, and this is what we are dealing with.